Okay, let's go on ahead and get started with our croquis, and we are going to draw the shape of our fur stole. So over the left shoulder, parenthesis facing right, and then slightly left, stopping at the forearm, and then a parenthesis facing down. And next we're going to just do a parenthesis facing right, and it stops at the elbow. So that's the beginning of our stole. Now we're going to go under the arm. So this parenthesis comes left and the second one as well, and then just round it with a smile. That is our left arm. So the stole is wrapped around from the back to the front, and it tucks underneath the forearm. On the right side, make a smile shape from the shoulder towards the bust. And then on the right side of that, parenthesis facing left, go on and connect that to your shoulder with a little frown. Next, we are going to have another smile at the bottom of our stole, and it comes on top of the body. Now you're just going to drag that down and connect it with a smile at the bottom. Now we're going to draw the arm facing upward so it's bent. So go on ahead, drag those parenthesis shapes towards the right, and then add in your hand. Start off with an N shape going down, and that's the top of your hand. Thumb is on the left, of course, and then the fingertips on the right. I decided to move the stole over to the right a tiny bit more so that you can see more of her body. Now just take away as many of the lines as you can. You barely want to see the outline of the stole because the lead will muddy up the colors of the marker as you put on top. So I'm just using my kneaded eraser and erasing as much of the stole as possible just so I can barely see a faint outline of it. So these are the markers that I'm going to be using, just a series of brown markers. Now remember, they don't all have to be in the same family. You can just test on paper to see if they blend nicely. So I've got some caramel colors, some beige, some tan, some dark chocolate, and of course we're going to go even deeper and add in some black. We're going to use also a little gray in between. Then we're going to add our colored pencils on top. Now we're going to start with the lightest color, and we are going to make our shapes going toward the left. It's a broken edge, and now make them towards the right. So it's the direction, the way the fur is growing. Now towards the left on the left side, and do the same here on the right. Follow those around, and then on the left. Now we're just going to gently start to fill in, just with squiggle lines. So we don't want it to be all solid, but we just want to fill in so that we have an idea of the beginnings of our fur. Again, we are staying with the lightest color. Now we're going to repeat. Same marker, just making it feel darker because it's on top of our ink. So these parentheses face left when we're on our right, and these parentheses face right when we're on the left side. We're just darkening that outer edge and darkening that center. That center shape is like an S, and then we build a few parentheses shapes around it. Repeat that for the left side. So the broken edge, once again, it just feels darker because we're going on top of our first layer. When you're on the right side, those parentheses face left. When you're on the left side for our fur, those parentheses face right. And we're just darkening a little bit in the center. Add a few of those lines that are parentheses in nature around that center. Now we repeat with the next color. So here we are, adding to those outer edges. This is slightly darker color. So we did twice with the first color. Now we're adding a darker marker on our outer edges. And you're just going to gradually repeat this process until you start to get the depth that works for you. So however dark you want to go is totally up to you. Build those parenthesis shapes facing left and right on these outer edges to gradually start to give the feeling of fur. As you repeat these processes, they will get thicker and thicker, so it won't look like lines. They'll look more like fur. Darken that center S shape. S is in Sam. And that's because the fur stole is created in such a way that it grows from the center out. And once again, I'm going back to that first color, and I'm just letting these broken lines extend further than my darker marker. So I'm extending those outer edges just by about 1/8 of an inch, just so that we start to get the hint of the undercoat. The undercolor is lighter, just the hint of it needs to extend further than our darker marker. Okay, it's time to move to the next shade. So here it's a caramel color, even darker than the first two. And I'm starting to build on the inside from that center S shape, bringing those curved parentheses outward. So these lines are shorter. They are not covering the outer edge entirely. That's important to note. So as I'm in the center, on the left of my center, I curve towards the left side. And when I'm on the right side of my center, my curving is towards the right side. So you're just repeating those processes. Here I am on the left side of that center line. Notice I'm not really extending outside of those edges. And now I'm on the right side of my center line. These parentheses are not extending outside of those edges. The end result is that you'll have a hint of the lightest shade on the very outer edges. I just added a shade there under her arm, just a little bit of shadow. Darken that center once again. And now we're moving to the next shade. So this is my fourth color, starting in that center, and I'm on the left side there curving around, and then I'm on the right side and I'm curving around that center. So you just want to make these nice and short, but they are the same type of parenthesis shape. So when you're on the right side, you're curving around so that parenthesis faces left. And when you're on the left side, you're curving around so that parenthesis faces right. But notice this darker color is not longer than the shades we already put down. Then just go back and darken that center S. That's S as in Sam. So now you're starting to get that feeling of fur, nice and thick, because that helps to add to the luxury nature of our fur. Now I'm just going to take color pencil right on top of it, and we're softening. So just tiny, teeny little circles, very lightly, to blend so that we don't have hairs as much that are individual. We want a lot of these hairs. So the colored pencil extends the feeling of thin hairs, and it makes it feel thicker and more full. So do that on the left and the right side, and then the center, of course, needs to continue to remain dark. Now we're simply going to do the same thing for the bottom. So I'm at the center with my colored pencil and I'm facing the left, and then on the right side I face a little bit towards the right. Now I'm going to darken with that marker, starting from the center I'm on the third marker. On the left of my center, I curve around towards the left side. On the right of my center, I curve around towards the right, darkening that S shape down the middle and being sure that the lines don't extend beyond the lighter color. And just darken a little more under her arm. It's better to add your shadows gradually so that you can control the amount of depth that you have. And then I'm extending this colored pencil very lightly once again, tiny, teeny little circles, and just bringing it out a little further so that I can have that feeling of thicker, more full fur as opposed to individual strokes that make it seem thinner. We don't really want to see a lot of white spaces underneath because the fur doesn't really show through where you can see the light that way. Now I'm moving on to the right side, starting at that center with my third marker and curving around towards the right of center and then towards the left of the center. Still being sure that the lines do not extend to cover up the outer edges because I want the lighter fur to show on those outer edges. It's just a hint, maybe a 1/16 of an inch even, that the lighter fur shows through and is longer than the darker fur. Now we take the colored pencil and we blend. So we're just darkening in that center and we are going to blend the same as we did on the left side. Going in with my lighter marker on the wedge tip side, and I'm just adding these edges so that we can really see this lighter color at these edges. We're just defining it a little bit at a time. Go through your entire fur stole and add these edges as much as you prefer, but it's the tiniest bit of the point that you want to use to create these very short edges. That helps to identify this as a fur and not a slick, smooth fabric. Okay, now I'm moving into the gray tones. So we're starting to deepen this even further. So this is warm gray and it's a number 6, but you can use any gray that you have that you feel blends well with your browns. So scribble on a side of paper just to test it first. I'm in the center here, curving towards the left, just making sure to keep that S shape. And then each time when I'm curving towards the left, I want to make sure that these lines do not get longer than the first set of lines. This gray is just adding to it, but we don't want it to overpower. So darken that middle and then put your parenthesis shapes on the left and the right of that center. Then you want to darken a little by the arm because of course that would cause a shadow. Now I'm going to go in with a very dark colored pencil. This one is black, and I'm just gently adding to it. So once again, these are tiny, teeny little soft strokes. Darken that center and then curve towards the left and curve toward the right from the center. Being sure to keep the depth in the middle so that it stays nice and dark in the center. You also want to be sure that you have a nice good shadow above that arm and below that arm. You're going to repeat this process until you get the depth that you personally like. Now I'm going on top of that with that warm gray just to thicken it and to make sure that I have a nice dense fur. I'm repeating on the other side. So I have my nice warm gray and just repeating the same thing on the right side. I'm going back in with my light marker to be sure that I keep adding tiny, teeny, little bitty lines that are very short. They're probably only about 1/8 of an inch long on those very far outer edges. And that again was with the lightest color, just to make sure that we can really see that hint. That hint makes all the difference of that lighter color coming through. I'm going in with my black, and I am going to gently add to the center, very, very softly, and then I'm curving from that center towards the left and curving from that center towards the right. So this black is very short. Remember, these strokes are at the center because that's the way the fur is growing, from the center outward. But these strokes are not super long. The length might be 1/2 inch. So make sure that you gently touch your page. Now, I am simply going to take my finger and smudge so that the black can now blend gently on top of the browns. So you'll be able to see through when you look closely on your page. And then I'm doing each part very short distances so that it won't dry before I get a chance to smear it. So I'm moving down a little further here, and then before it dries, I'm going to take my finger so I can smudge it. Just the tiniest bit, and I'm just dragging that smudge downward in a slight parenthesis shape. Continue on for the entire stole in the same manner. So here now, to blend that black in, I'm going to take my warm gray. That's warm gray number 6 that I'm using, but you can use whatever colors you happen to have. Just test them first. And now I'm transitioning from the black over the brown. So I'm at the edges of the black, and then I'm smearing it with my finger. So I'm smudging just a tiny bit so that the black transition is not the last part that we see, but it goes from the black to the gray, then to the brown. Remember to work in sections and smudge as you go along so that you do not allow it to dry. And when you're smudging, you just gently touch. Very, very gently, and drag down slightly in a parenthesis shape. Okay, I'm going to repeat that process on the right side of the stole as well. Laying down that black, starting in the center, curving toward the right, then I'll curve toward the left. And I want to be sure that I don't do too much where it dries fully, and then smudge. And once again, now that the black is on and I've smudged it, I'm going to my warm gray, just at those edges of the black, and I am going to transition so that the edge of the black then transitions to the gray, and then the browns will be the last tones that you see. And remember, the gray doesn't take over the entire sketch. so that those very, very, very edges are still the lighter tones of brown. All right, now I'm just going in with my yellow colored pencil, and I am adding very lightly on top of these darker black and gray areas, and in the same way that I started. So I'm curving to the left and curving to the right from the center. Very gently just add in a few of these yellow strokes, because this will help to let the very little light that does reflect show through. Very often you'll find that there are several colors on an animal that make up the one color overall. So there might be browns, grays, blacks, maybe even some hints of caramel and hints of blondes even, but that makes an overall brown feeling. Next, I'm just going to move to the white and repeat. This is colored pencil and gently adding just the faintest bit of color on top of my browns and my grays and my blacks. Not a whole lot, and keeping this to the outer edges so that the light can really reflect. It doesn't allow you to see through the fur, but the light sits on top of those lightest colors of hair, and then they allow you to see just those bits of highlight. Here, I'm adding just a bit more yellow, and this is all for your taste level. So there's really no right or wrong. It's just a preference. So go on ahead and add as much as you see fit. And now we're moving on to our white gel pen. So a white gel pen is very powerful. So what I'm going to do is create some of these very soft parenthesis shapes, very short, and then smudge them. So it's like a little comma almost, and then smudge them. Keep it at the very outer edges, and that's once again another layer of depth that you're adding to your creation. Notice I'm doing a tiny little bit at a time, and then I'm smudging it because I do not want it to fully dry. When you smudge it, you allow the other colors to show through slightly underneath, and that creates a much more realistic effect. So go on ahead and repeat this process on your outer edges of your fur so that you can create the look that you desire. And that's it. Thank you so much for taking time to join in fashion sketching with me, Miss Osuna. I'll look forward to seeing you again on the next video.